when I call your name. Every fear is banished from here. When you call my name, I'll come running, running to you. And you say, come to me. Spread your wings. Catch the wind, catch the wind. He's carrying you.
Shalom and welcome to this month's Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ UK, and this is the ministry that brings you a closer connection to Israel and the Jewish people through the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem UK. And in this month's programme we'll be talking about the brutal and hideous murder of two young Israeli diplomats, both Messianics, that has left the ministry devastated. And in this programme today I'm joined by Pastor Jonathan Croft, who's a regional leader in the London area for the ministry, together with Anita Conter, who is also representing London as well for ICEJ UK. So welcome to the programme. Jonathan, you've just had an extraordinary leaders trip out to Israel where you and other leaders belonging to the ministry that is the International Christian Embassy around the world have recently been to Israel. You've shown us videos of visiting those kibbutzes that were destroyed by Hamas back on October the 7th. Share with us your reflections of essentially seeing the biggest crime scene committed against Israel in the modern history, dating back to October the 7th, 2023.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Good to be on the programme again.
Likewise.
Yeah, I had the privilege of going over to Israel just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the days we had a trip down to the southern border, the Gaza border, and it's something that you don't want to go and see, but I believe it's important to go and see. It's the same as the Holocaust Museum. I think it's a must. If you go into Jerusalem, it's a must that you go and see that. But I believe also now it's so important to go and see the Novi sites. We went to the Kibbutz Be'eri, and to see the actual buildings that are burnt out were there were Jewish families trying to hide from the atrocities that were taking place. You can see the bullet marks on the doors, the safe rooms. You hear the stories of how people were massacred because they were able to get some smoke in the rooms, and they had the choice, you know, do we burn to death or do we try and escape through the door? And they were shot coming out. Stories like that, and other times you have stories where they were so silent in the safe rooms for up to 16 hours until they were rescued in a safe way. Once the Kibbutz Be'eri in particular was rescued by the IDF eventually. That's another story. But ultimately it is horrific to see the stories and the heroism of many to defend the property and land that kept at bay for hours some of times the atrocities that they were wanting to carry out in those areas. But to see the devastation in some of the properties. And in the Kibbutz Be'eri, what they had done is they'd done photographs of people who had perished or who had died, who murdered, in the particular houses with their stories. And again, like the Novi site, to read the particular stories is very, very moving. And, you know, if you are going to go to Israel, it is, I believe, one of the areas that you do need to go and see so that you have your own stories to tell. You know, you can say, I'm a first-hand witness of the atrocities that took place on the 7th of thing. We went again to an army base right on the border. We spoke to a major that was one of the first on the scenes. And it's incredible that a lot of the times that the people who were first on the scenes were Messianic soldiers. The first helicopter that was on the scene on that border was a Messianic. And, you know, to hear the stories of how God has turned the whole Messianic Jewish thing around through this war is quite interesting because there's a recognition now that they're fighting for our country. And so therefore there is a lot more acceptance to Messianics being in the IDF. So that's a side issue, but it's one that we heard about from a major that was at the forefront of the operation on the 7th of October.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And like you, I've seen kibbutz near Oz and the devastation itself. And I think if you go to Israel, it's an absolute must to see with your own eyes the horrors that unfolded in October the 7th. But would you kind of give us an update on the ministry that is the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem UK, that is doing so much humanitarian work in Israel and blessing and standing with Israel at this very, very difficult time?
Yeah. I think I'm privileged to be part of such a ministry. We are so involved in all sorts of different things, from the Holocaust home that we have in Haifa. We have an Aliyah and integration programs that are underway continually. And because of the anti-Semitism across the globe, there's more and more people who want to go back to the only Jewish state in the world, and that's Israel. And so Aliyah is still happening, and ICEJ is very much involved in that, and the UK office is sometimes providing finance to make things like that happen. We're also a Future Hope, helping people to transition, because there's a lot of actual poverty in Israel. People don't realize that there is a lot of wealth, but there's also a lot of poverty because of the people that are coming back to the land. They don't have a lot much. And so, you know, there is organizations that are trying to help people get on the steps and the ladder from poverty to some sort of normal life. We've got different things that are happening with people who have been stressed through the situation. And ICEJ on the ground is helping with musical instruments, animals, and different things like that. We're making a real difference to people with PSD and things like that, where we're hands-on. It's, yeah, we love Jesus, but it's also a hands-on ministry. And we just want to get involved wherever we see the need. And the UK branch is there to support all that takes place in Jerusalem and in Israel.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the update. And Anita, it's a great pleasure to have you joining us on this month's Jerusalem Dispatch. Share with us your role within the ministry of ICEJ UK, and tell us also, I know you've been on before, but tell us also how you got involved in the ministry.
Sure, and thank you. It's great to be here. And as Jonathan was saying, it's really a privilege to be part of, you know, the work that ICEJ UK and, you know, in Jerusalem and elsewhere, you know, is involved in. So a lot of my role is focused on prayer. Obviously, that's how I kind of first got into the ministry, in terms of interceding and praying, and we'll talk about that perhaps a bit later. But advocacy, and that's kind of taken lead in the last few years. So with regards to community outreach to our Jewish you know, communities here in the UK, so that's taken a bit of a turn. Advocacy with regards to the church and trying to get them involved, you know, through whether it's inviting them to conferences and actually talking to people, even on a one-to-one or in groups, like my networks and groups and so on. And the other thing is with the Jewish community, as a result of the, you know, kind of outreach work that's been going on, sort of behind the scenes, they invite you to their high, you know, kind of holidays, you know, it's a Passover and so on, you know, so you kind of get an insight into what, you know, their lives and, you know, how they live those lives out. And recently, I think they had Remembrance Day, David Yom HaShoim, I think it's called. My pronunciation is right.
HaShoah.
Yeah, and so I went to a synagogue. This was at Mill Hill, where they were recognising, obviously, the fallen soldiers. So we had a guest soldier who had just come back literally from the front, was on furlough, I guess, and was talking about what life was, you know, on the front lines. That was really interesting, but I think what what I took away from that is that, you know, the resilience, and also how the Jewish people actually welcome people, others, as it were, who are not necessarily Jewish, non-Jewish like me, you know, welcome them and appreciate the work that we're doing with them. So it's been a mixture of things. The other way I've got involved, obviously, as well, is through the Feast of Tabernacles. And I've been to Israel about three or four times now, I can't remember. But serving on the, you know, as a volunteer on the feast. And that gives you an insight in terms of, you know, Israel, what's going on, how, you know, the local community interact with Christians.
Wonderful. And it's so important to engage with the Jewish community, so well done for doing that. And Jonathan, there is an exciting conference coming up, isn't there, in Edinburgh, just north of the border, up in Scotland, and I know that we have many supporters up there. So do you want to unpack for us the exciting conference that our viewers can expect in July in Edinburgh? Yeah,
it's called the Apple of God's Eye, and it's going to be held at St. Thomas's Church on the 5th of July. And, you know, it's going to be a great time. Our team is going to be up there. Many of the team travel up there, so it will be worship, but there will be some great teaching that will take place. But, you know, ultimately we want people to come. So, you know, we really want folks to let people know that this is on. Travel to St. Thomas's Church in Edinburgh, come to that event, and you'll hear some amazing things and some things that you can actually then carry back to your friendship groups.
Absolutely, and of course you can have Liz and Naftali Hirsch, who wrote that incredible book called Saving Abigail, and it's her story of how she put pressure on the Biden administration to release some of the hostages that included Abigail. So to hear her alone would be very special. And Anita, tell us about this year's Feast of Tabernacles. It's taking place in Jerusalem, starts on the evening of Monday the 6th of October and finishes on Monday the 13th of October. And the theme for this year is 10 from every nation. Share with us how our viewers watching today's programme can be part of this special event by visiting Israel for the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay,
so the Feast of Tabernacles, which takes place annually, obviously, this year is based on the vision of Zechariah. So it comes from, Zechariah 8:23, which our viewers probably know, where the Lord, it says, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, in those days, 10 men from every language of the nations will grasp the sleeve of a Jewish man, saying, 'Let us go with you, for we've heard that God is with you.'" And so that's the aim. And it's quite funny, just even reading that verse, it says 10 men of every language of the nations. You know, when we talk about nations, you may instantly just think of the country, but you know, there are nations within nations in terms of languages, and I know, you know, across, in the developing world, they might have like 10, 12 languages or more. So that's a lot of people. But the feast, as you said, it's going to be held from the 6th to 13th of October. It includes a 4-day package of events which will be in Jerusalem. That's 4 days in Jerusalem, and the rest of the time will be spent in Gaza, on the Gaza border, to honour the fallen. Jonathan has already mentioned about, you know, his recent trip and, you know, what's happening there with, you know, acknowledging those who died on the Gaza border in the various kibbutz communities. And then it then moves to a desert area where there'll be a meal, worship, under the stars, and so on. And then back in Jerusalem for 4 more days of worship, hearing from key speakers from across the globe, and just basically just seeking God and just, you know, if you like, sort of reveling in his prophetic promises.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. So let's have a look now at this excellent trailer produced by ICEJ in Jerusalem called 10 from Every Tribe, that really does show the highlights of this year's Feast of Tabernacles 2025. Take a look.
Jerusalem is such an incredible city, called to be a house of prayer for all nations. We've seen this in action over the past 45 years when the Christian Embassy has been bringing Christians from all over the world up to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles based on the vision of Zechariah the prophet, chapter 14, verse 16, that all nations will one day come up to Jerusalem to worship the Lord and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This year's feast theme is 10 from every nation, also taken from the prophet Zechariah chapter 8 and verse 23. It says, "In those days," meaning our day, 10 men from every language of the nations shall grasp the sleeve of a Jewish man, saying, "Let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." This 10 men speaks of a righteous remnant in every language of the nations. It relates back to when Abraham interceded for Sodom and said, "If you find even 10 righteous men, will you not destroy the city?" We want to see a righteous remnant, at least 10 Christian pilgrims from every nation, including your nation, coming up to this year's Feast of Tabernacles, because you recognize the centrality of Israel and the Jewish people in God's salvation plan for the whole world and His special plans and purposes for the city of Jerusalem in our day. We want to see a righteous remnant, at least 10 from your nation, at this year's Feast of Tabernacles. Come and join us in October.
So will you be one of 10 representing the United Kingdom, not in the Eurovision Song Contest, but the Feast of Tabernacles this year in Jerusalem? Jonathan, share with us how exciting it is that now there's a lot more flights. It's a lot easier to get to Israel, despite the fact that Israel's still at war with Hamas in Gaza, and how this is wonderful opportunity to meet so many different believers around the world and just get such good biblical teaching and to be part of something special.
It is special. It has been an honour again to go to the Feast of Tabernacles, to go to the actual events itself. But for me, the highlight was the Jerusalem March, because it's a witness. It's a march of witness, and we're talking about tens of thousands of Christians walking the streets of Jerusalem, just saying, "We stand with you," and that's something special. But I want everybody to go to the Feast of Tabernacles. It would be great if that could happen. And there are ways to do it. You can go in person, but you can actually watch it online too. So I agree with Anita, it's 10 from every nation, and obviously David Parsons said something similar. But if you aren't able to go, you can sign up to follow it online, and just to get a feel of it so that you can then plan to go the following year and join us in Jerusalem, because together something happens when there's a roll call of the nations on one evening, and it's just flag after flag after flag of different nations that are just there to worship God, as it says in Zechariah 14, but also to come and to the feast, because those are the two things that it says in Zechariah 14. And so therefore we are worshiping God, but we're also going there to celebrate all that God is wanting to do, and remembering at the time in the wilderness, but also the good times that are going to come when Jesus comes back as Messiah.
Wonderful. Anita, share for us, for any young people watching, particularly we're talking Gen Z generation, how they can be part of the Summer Rise Programme Tour 2025, which takes place in July.
Okay, yeah, so the Arise Tour takes place from 20th to the 28th of July, and it's for young people aged 18 to 30. So
it rules all of us out,
yeah,
doesn't it?
It does, unfortunately. Unfortunately. But it's a way to get to know more about Israel. So if you have young, whether it's your children or relatives, nieces, nephews, or whoever who are interested, I think it will be good, because obviously we're seeing, and we don't want to get too political here, but on the streets with the pro-Palestinian marches, a lot of young people are being kind of what's the word, brainwashed by, you know, what's happening, and, you know, they don't know Israel. It's best to know for yourself. I tell them, I have children within that bracket, and, you know, I'm encouraging them, provided they can get time off work and so on, to actually attend the Arise tour. But it will certainly open up their understanding of Israel. You know, you walk where Jesus walked, prayed where Jesus prayed, and more importantly, just get to know a place rather than, you know, have opinions from afar.
I'll do
So
some
I
hiking.
would encourage, oh yeah, some hiking.
Quad biking.
You've been on it already.
I haven't been on it, I'd like to go on it.
But yeah, you know, so, you know, to different parts of Israel, a real good tour.
So let's have a look at the trailer for the Summer Arise programme for anyone from 18 to 30. Take a look, it looks exciting.
If you want to see the Bible come to life, then this experience is for you. Explore, experience, embrace. This summer, join young people from all over the globe on an adventure of a lifetime.
So if you or your children or your grandchildren want to be part of Summer Arise, then do get in touch with the office, and the website details will be coming up. Contact Joanne, and you can have a very, very exciting, action-packed time in Israel, doing amazing things and worshipping the Lord in Jerusalem. Very cool. Jonathan, sadly on a more tragic, somber note, I think we have to really mention the big news topic of this month's Jerusalem Dispatch, and this is the horrific and evil murder of Yaron Liyinsky and his bride-to-be Sarah Milligan, who both worked for the Israeli embassy in Washington DC, who were brutally murdered in cold blood outside of the Jewish Museum in Washington DC on Wednesday the 21st of May. And of course, a member of the ICEJ UK team knew Yaron very, very well. And I know Washington, DC very well, having worked there. I know where the Jewish Museum is. And I've also spoken and been to the Israeli embassy in Washington, DC on a couple of occasions as well. So just share with us your reflection on what is a very sad time for the Ministry of ICEJ UK.
Yeah, like you said, it's a tragedy of what happened. I have mixed emotions. I'm angry that this can and could occur in July or May 25, that two people could be gunned down in the way that they did. But ICJ, they are friends of ICJ. They go to King of Kings Church. They actually go to the same congregation in King of Kings as Jürgen and his wife, Vesna. And I know friends who go to that congregation too, who knew these guys. He was only 30, she was 26. They love the Lord, that's the good thing, that we know where they are. However, it is such a loss. They went to a lot of ICEJ events in Washington. He represented the embassy there at the Christian events. So he was very much known in that community, both for the Jewish community and the Messianic community. And, you know, the reports you're getting back, they were a lovely couple. They were about to get engaged in Jerusalem. So sad. The annoying bit, it's happened. And, you know, the hatred. And for me, the media, I get really annoyed by the media and sometimes our governments. That morning, there was a report saying 14,000 babies were going to die within 48 hours. That was pressed in our media. That was then stated in our government and governments around the world. World leaders repeated that atrocity. And then that evening, this happened. I believe it's we need to be very careful of words, and I want to talk, in a sense, to governments and to the press, that actually the words that you print, the words that you say matter, and this hatred that is being vilified right around the world that caused this guy, this fanatic, to do what he did just 2 weeks ago. It was, you know, sometimes it's the words that have been spoken can be triggers to cause people to do these things. And so I get annoyed. I'm saddened, so saddened by the tragedy and the loss of life from two beautiful people who love the Lord. However, I'm annoyed because also the press, the world leaders who should know better, spoke out of turn, and that can feed so many different things in so many different ways. And the world needs to wake up, press needs to wake up, media needs to wake up, world leaders need to wake up, that what they say does matter. And, you know, the vilification of Jews, the hatred that is there in governments and in press, that can lead to people taking actions like we saw here. We know in this country, just a few weeks back, there was a group of Iranians that were arrested, but they were wanting to attack. There was another guy arrested, a German, American German, who was arrested at New York because he was threatening to blow up something. Why? Where is it all coming from? It's coming through a hatred, but that comes as well from words that are spoken by people who should know better. And that's the media and also world leaders.
No,
so
absolutely.
There is two things coming on. I'm so sad the loss. And ICEJ, there's a lot of people who knew them, but there's also an anger that these things can be encouraged by the words that are spoken by people who should know better.
Absolutely, because it's all about incitement and hatred.
Absolutely.
And then leads to innocent Jewish blood being murdered on the streets of Washington, D.C. Anita, tell us the impact that this horrific murder on both Yaron and Sharon has had on Israel, on the Israeli diplomatic community and the Jewish community worldwide, but also the Messianic Jewish community in Israel, who are really, really suffering with the loss of two of their own.
Okay. Simon, so obviously there's a lot of reckless incitement, as you know, Jonathan has outlined, you know, and the emotion behind it, it's difficult to hold back as a human being, yeah? So because of the irresponsible statements from world leaders, particularly from the media, a lot of Jews actually are feeling quite fearful. So let's start with the UK. You know, you're told, you know, when that happened, I think literally within some hours of it happening, I'm part of a support group, an online support group, Israel support group that is run by Jewish people, but it includes Gentiles and anyone who's interested in supporting Israel. But within hours, they were saying, don't, you know, if you go out, don't show any, you know, obvious forms of identity. Obvious forms of products that would label you as a Jew. So, you know, if you're Orthodox, you know, you're not going to be able to wear your kippah or your Star of David. This is nonsense. Do you understand? It's really an issue. And the other thing is that, you know, something that happened just this bank holiday on a Monday was, you know, just people being able to go out and enjoy themselves. A group of boys, I think it was 3-4 young boys, they were at Hampstead Station and they were approached by a gang who had knives and who wanted to attack them. So the intent was, you're Jewish, we're going to attack you. That shouldn't be. You know, I just feel that a lot of the sentiments from our Jewish brothers and sisters, I like to call them, is like, why are we here? We need to get out, which in some ways feeds into, you know, the God's prophetic word about Aliyah and people going back, but they should be able to go back at their own given time. So the impact is fear, and that's the whole point. They want to instill fear so people don't do things, instill fear in people who want to tell the truth as well. But unfortunately, you know, there are people like us who do want to, you know, stand for truth and say, you know, and not be fearful. and many Jewish people who are now standing up and are not fearful. And I think week after week, we've got people who go into Jewish areas, i.e. the pro-Palestinian mob will go into Jewish areas and start causing problems, whether it's Swiss Cottage. But you have a lot of counter-protest groups, Israeli counter-protest groups that actually, are standing up now.
So it's important, I think, to read here a statement made by the president of ICEJ in Jerusalem, Dr. Jürgen Bühler, who knew Yaron well. So he wrote this on Friday, the 23rd of May. The leadership and global family of the International Christian Embassy at Jerusalem have all been shocked and grieved at the brutal murder of Yaron Leshinsky, 30, and Sarah Milgram, 26, outside the AJC event at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday evening. This was cruel, a despicable act of fanatical hatred bred by the rampant wave of anti-Semitism currently manifesting itself against Israel and the Jewish people worldwide. We condemn the premeditated killing of these two Israeli staff members, as well as the reckless incitement against the Jewish state and the people which fuel it, including the many recent irresponsible statements against Israel emanating from world leaders. We also mourn with our Jewish friends the loss of Yaron and Sarah, and I and my family personally knew Yaron as a member of our congregation in Jerusalem. Like my family, he moved to Israel from Germany out of a deep conviction that he belonged to this nation. Several of our Jerusalem staff also knew Yaron and his family, and we are all heartbroken for the Leshinsky family and the Milgram family as well. May they be comforted and consoled, according to Isaiah chapter 61, verses 2 and 3. And Jürgen then went on to write, I fondly remember Yaron as an outstanding, articulate young man with a promising diplomatic career ahead of him. He attended a number of Christian embassy events as part of the official delegations of the Israeli embassy in Washington. His death is a loss for the whole nation of Israel, and it's made all the more sad and painful coming right before the joy of his engagement to Sarah. The tragic loss of Yaron and Sarah is a clarion call for Christians everywhere to stand up as never before against anti-Semitic incitement that is permeating our global discourse. And that's from Dr. Jürgen Bühler, the president of ICEJ in Jerusalem. Jonathan, share with us your thoughts on this one, but also share, for example, how Yaron actually came from Germany to make Aliyah, served in the IDF, spoke 3 languages fluently, including Japanese, and was aspiring to be an incredible diplomat as well.
Yeah, obviously, hearing the story, hearing Jürgen's comments about knowing him personally is just something that, for me, it's showing his personality. And Yaron, for me, as he came from Germany, somebody who had known anti-Semitism, Jewish hatred, the Holocaust took place, but then gave his life and his all to serve Israel and that community, both first in the IDF, worked up to then go to the embassies and work in the embassies. I take my hat off to anybody like him who believes in something so strongly. Yes, he had his faith in, God, but he also understood that, you have to serve your nation as well. And Yaron did that in an excellent way. I believe he was a light in the darkness. I think he was a person who was shone wherever he went, into every environment that he went into. He knew that he was a representative of something far bigger than what he was part of.
Excellent. And Anita, share with us how, with this rising climate of Jew hatred and these demonstrations of hate that we're seeing with the big Palestinian marches and the Free Palestine chants, including what this murderer Rodriguez chanted when he was arrested by the police, is actually contributing to this rise in Jew hatred and demonization of Israel that is being fueled in our media, and our politicians also are inflaming the rhetoric. And of course, then this leads to the horrific murder of this two beautiful couple that sadly were going to fly to Jerusalem to get engaged and then get married.
Yeah, certainly, and absolutely. It is the fact that anti-Semitism, whether it's in the UK or Europe or right across the globe, has become a thing. And I say a thing because every so often you'll get big demonstrations, campaigns as Black Lives Matter, or some years ago and so on. But particularly among certain this generation, and it's almost like they wear a badge. Loud and proud. It's good to be anti-Semitic. They're saying, it's like virtual signalling that that's okay. It's okay to do it, and therefore the actions that follow, they feel are totally irrelevant because they are actually, looking out for the so-called Palestinians. But the truth is, if you talk to some of these people who are on the pro-Palestinian marches, who are anti-Semitic, they don't really care about Palestine. They don't care about the people. They just care because it's a thing. It's the latest thing to do. And it kind of covers, a range of things. It makes me think, and I don't know the exact scripture, but when King David was, before he became king, and he was in exile, and he had his band of men that surrounded him, and they were all men, that were discontent. They had issues with life, brave warriors, it turns out in the end, but they were discontent. So a lot of discontentment in our society, whether it's for economic, social, political issues, is now being kind of harnessed, and it's like, let's see if we can package it and therefore be, anti-Semitic to groups of people. And I think we, as a body of Christ, really need to be on our guard and watchful, and making sure that we dispel the lies, the deception, and speak the truth. Unfortunately, it seems that the church can be so quiet. The silence is deafening at times with this, and it's like, why? During World War II, which is, I'm not saying the Holocaust happened because of the church, but the church was silent. They did nothing, said nothing. There might have been people who knew it was wrong. There were good people who did things and hid Jews and so on, and we've got lots of stories about that. But generally, there's too much silence. So it's about dispelling the myths and really standing for what is true. And you're going to get attacked. We as Christians, maybe physically, but certainly from a spiritual point of view and a worldly view, you will get attacked for standing up for the truth. But I'd rather stand for the truth rather than...
Absolutely. You're on here standing for the truth.
Yeah.
So well done. Let's have a look now at this excellent video that is produced by the Israeli Foreign Ministry that warns about the danger of demonizing Israel and directing hatred towards Israel and the Jewish people. And these are the consequences.
This didn't start last night. For months, Israelis and Jews have been demonized, threatened, hunted, online, on campus, in the streets. Last night, Yaron and Sarah, staff members of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., just days from getting engaged, were murdered outside the Jewish Museum in the U.S. Capitol. Their killer screamed a slogan now used as a license to kill. Free Palestine. This isn't protest, it's hate, and it's spreading. Hate speech turned into murder. Speak up, or let it happen again. Because never again means nothing if we stay silent.
And that was courtesy of the Israeli Foreign Ministry. We can't afford to be silent in these days when Israel is being absolutely demonized. Jonathan, this murder, according to my notes, was Elias Rodriguez. He's 30. He is a left-wing political fanatic. He is an activist for Black Lives Matter. After October 7th, he apparently became obsessed with Hamas. And share with us how, by identifying with Hamas, he then took that same spirit of murder that Hamas did and carried out this brutal and evil murder of 2 young Israeli diplomats. And he shot them both in the back and shot over them to ensure that they both died.
I think people forget what Hamas's charter says. When Hamas were formed, in their charter, it's very, very clear on a couple of points where it says we're there to kill the Jews, to annihilate them, to wipe them off the map. In their books, it's all about Palestine. Israel is not even shown in some of their books. With that hatred, and it's hatred, obviously I think it's satanic, but that hatred that is there and that propaganda, it's in the media. And the media, Hamas have done really well, actually, in its media presence, and they're getting their messages out. And unfortunately, Elias, this person who has been arrested, but obviously he has political activism in there. There's something going on in his life. But the hatred that was, if he got obsessed with Hamas, Hamas have a hatred towards Israel. It's in their charter. It still is. If you speak to somebody in Hamas, they haven't reneged on that particular point in their charter. So if somebody's going to get, interested in Hamas, they're going to look at what it says, what they do. Ultimately, hatred is going to be there. And, unfortunately, there is no other rhetoric coming to oppose that. Certainly currently with the antisemitism across the globe, in our universities, on our streets, all the negative, free Palestine, free Palestine. I agree. I want them to see free Palestine. It's Gaza for me, not just Palestine. Palestine is a word. But ultimately, I want those people to be free. And for me, those people are free when Hamas are gone and the Hamas are destroyed. Because that rhetoric that they continue to speak again and again and again is hatred, 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 kill, kill, kill. And it's only now, and Elias is one of them, there's been many others that have taken that rhetoric and have put that into action, and he has been one of them.
Absolutely. And Anita, share with us the response of the Israeli Prime Minister, who has actually called out our own Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, together with Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, and President Macron of France, for contributing to the brutal murder of these 2 young Israeli diplomats because of this climate of hatred towards Israel and this demonization of Israel that he actually believes our Prime Minister has participated in. Share with us your thoughts.
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu was very right in his response, and one of the things that stuck out in terms of his statement to the world, or certainly to the Prime Ministers, was you're on the wrong side of humanity, justice, and history. So and it is, and I often wonder, because, for example, not so long ago, a few months ago, I think we heard again from the government that they were funding Hamas from a humanitarian aid point of view, and they might not use Hamas, but certainly wanted, were sending more money. David Lammy proudly, got up and stood up and said, "Oh, we've decided to send X. I don't know how many million it was.
It's 35 million to UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Works Agency, and their employees carried out the massacre of October.
Exactly, and UNRWA's been banned anyway in Israel, rightly so, and it's got them out. So it's a real issue, and I think it's a kind of double-mindedness or just deliberate, ignorance. I'm not quite sure, but Prime Minister Netanyahu also said, that these are supposed to be allies. France, UK, and Canada are supposed to be allies, and yet, they're imposing their will, threatening Israel with regards to sanctions, if it was to do with, getting food aid, but if they don't stop the war, threatening Israel as part of the UN body, who sit high and lofty, and exalt themselves often, against God's purposes and word, but basically you know, telling them that you need to have a Palestinian state. I mean, who does that? If you've got friends like that, I mean, goodness knows what enemies look like. So, you know, he was right in his response. Whether they'll listen, because it's almost like Israel's a pariah, isn't it? State right now, you know, anything that comes out there is not to be taken seriously, it seems. But I think Israel's right to stand on its, you know, on stand ground and not give in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jonathan, from our viewers' perspective, how should we respond to this increasing climate of hatred towards Israel and also the Jewish people, and how we have a role to advocate for Israel, because so many Jewish people are afraid to do that, and they need to know that they're not alone. I know that you do a great work in actually going to the big pro-Israel rallies and showing that love and support to the Jewish community who are scared and vulnerable at this time.
Yeah, for me it's such an important thing, and you know, Anita, you brought it up regarding the Second World War. And you mentioned, you know, that the church was silent at the time, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he was a minister at the time, and he said, I can't, you know, not speak about this issue. And so I believe as a Christian, as somebody who believes the word of God, I cannot be silent on this issue either. I think we need to be very careful what we do put online, and we don't, you know, just repeat rhetoric without actually checking out the information that we're sending forth. But, you know, I think you can do it in many ways. One is to get information and to start to speak out the truth that, you know, is countering all the lies that are actually in our media at this time. But for me, it's very, very clear that we have an opportunity. We have a voice, God's given us a voice, and we need to use our voice, just like Dietrich Bonhoeffer did back in 1943, etc. He did it then. I believe that as the church, as a Christian, we need to do it now.
Absolutely. And of course, you're very much involved in prayer, aren't you, Anita? So share with us how also we need to be praying at this time. And for any prayer warriors watching the program, intercessors, they can also take part in a lot of the Zoom prayer meetings to pray for Israel, particularly the Rosh Chodesh meetings that happen once a month.
That's right. So Rosh Chodesh, which means head of the month, are prayer meetings that we have as part of ICEJ. It's the kind of, it forms the kind of the engine room of all the work that is being done by us as an organisation. So prior to the war, we used to have it once a week, every Wednesday, from 2:30 to 3:30 UK time. But since the war, it's on every day, and it's an online Zoom platform, a prayer platform, where people from across the globe come together and pray. And obviously it's led by our team in Jerusalem, and anybody can join. But it's really important to keep praying. I know my own, on a personal level, you know, when you see things that are not right, praying actually makes the difference, you know, as we all know. And, you know, it kind of breaks through, and you know, you start seeing results. And more recently, the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem, they, we may come to that, but the have set up a prayer, I suppose, journey based on the, is it Nicosean?
Yeah. Council.
And it started on the 19th of May, finishes on the 24th of August. So during our prayer time, the prayer is to actually to reconcile the church with the Jewish nations, because there's lots of things that have happened, of course, you know, over the centuries, of course, you know, the Jews as a nation to mistrust Christians, Christian edicts, you know, Roman Emperor Constantine and so on, and we'll probably come to that in a bit more detail, but it's really bringing the church and the Jews together to reconcile, to repent, but also, most important, reconcile as much as possible. So that's going on from now until August, 24th of August.
And Jonathan, just share with us, because you've been out to Israel only a couple of weeks ago, the importance of the ICEJ UK's humanitarian work to Israel, helping rebuild shattered lives after the horrors of October the 7th.
When you visit a kibbutz, when you visit the north, which I have done, where, you know, communities were completely thrown out of their homes for months and months, to see then the work of ICEJ going into those communities and just helping people rebuild lives from the youngest to the oldest, and every age in between. It's just great to be part of a work that is hands-on, but practically showing God's love genuinely to people's lives.
So let's have a look at one of these very important humanitarian projects that the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem are participating in. And this is therapy for those children in particular who are suffering post-traumatic stress disorder from the horrors of October the 7th, and this time using horses as therapy.
Today I'm at Kibbutz Orim on an animal therapy farm. You see behind me a few of the horses the ICEJ has donated to enable children to come here for trauma therapy. The animal corner, the horses therapy area, it's all going to be expanded and renovated, and the ICEJ is a part of this special project. We invite you to come and learn more about it and join with us too.
שלום, אני עודד, אני מנהל את החווה פה באורים. אני מנהל את החווה הזאת משנת 2020. התחלנו במרץ 2020 בקורונה, והקורונה הביאה איתה הרבה אתגרים, ובגלל הסגרים פתחנו, סגרנו, ובסופו של דבר המשכנו, לא עצרנו. ובעצם המטרה פה היא לתת מענה מההתחלה, לתת מענה לאוכלוסייה ולקהילה פה במועצה אזורית אשכול ובמועצה אזורית שער הנגב, ואנחנו בעצם חווה טיפולית. המענה הוא מענה טיפולי, הוא תומך, הוא לעבוד עם ילדים עם קשיים, אם זה קשיים רגשיים, קשיים מוטוריים. זה היה ההתחלה, לשם זה הקמנו את החווה. ב7 לאוקטובר התחילה פה המלחמה. אנחנו כולנו פה מהאזור של העוטף, כולנו פה מכירים את האזור טוב, גדלנו פה. אני אישית מקיבוץ כפר עזה, והמשפחה שלי מכפר עזה, אז הטראומה, אנחנו מכירים אותה טוב מאוד, ממעגלים מאוד מאוד קרובים, וגם כל הצוות הוא מהאזור, כל אחד מיישוב אחר, ובעצם בשביעי החווה נעצרה, נסגרה. היום ההתמקדות שלנו היא בטראומה, ואנחנו עוברים הכשרות לעבוד בטראומה. אנחנו בכלל, כל החווה עוברת שינוי. אז פינת החי בעצם זה מקום שהוא כיום מקום לא טוב, ואנחנו רוצים מאוד מאוד לפתח אותו. אנחנו מאוד רוצים לקחת אותו ולהפוך אותו למשהו שהוא היה פעם מאוד יפה. אם זה מבחינת המתקן, שאנחנו רוצים לעשות מתקן טוב, מגרש טוב, סוסים טובים, אז זה גם משהו שאנחנו עושים, ואנחנו עוד פעם אני אגיד שאנחנו נעזרים באנשים טובים שתורמים ועוזרים לנו לפתח ולהקים את הדבר הזה. אני רוצה מאוד להודות ולהגיד תודה רבה גדולה לשגרירות הנוצרית שעוזרת ואיתנו, ואפשר להגיד לך תודה.
So when you support the ministry of ICEJ UK, that is what your money goes to, helping those Israelis recovering from the horrors of October the 7th. And if you love animals and you love horses, it's great to see how they're being utilised to rebuild broken lives of the horrors of October the 7th. Down to the last couple of minutes, you've both done a great job on this month's Jerusalem Dispatch. Anita, share with us how our viewers watching today can get involved in the ministry that is ICEJ UK, and also the importance of signing up so they know all the exciting programs, all the exciting information coming out of Israel, and how they can be a part of something special.
Certainly. So it's really easy to get involved with ICEJ. You know, I mentioned prayer earlier. You've seen or heard about certainly the number of projects that we have, humanitarian aid. So, you know, in giving, if people want to, you know, how do I give? How do I know my money is going to the right place? They can give to ICEJ. and you know it covers a lot of projects. You know, there's the zoo therapy, the horses that you know on the video that was just shown, but there's also you know provision of medical equipment, you know, helping evacuees because a lot of people have been displaced, obviously since October the 7th, and just helping the nation of Israel. And remember, the nation of Israel, you know, people think, oh, is it just Jews? No, it's made up of a whole number of people, Druze, Bedouins, and so on. So amazing things are happening. And also, but on a local level here, you don't even have to, you know, set foot in Israel just yet until you're ready. You can actually, you know, reach out to your Jewish community, make sure that, you know, they're fine, they're okay.
That's a great message. So Anita and John, thanks you so much for being my guest on this month's Jerusalem Dispatch. I want to thank you for watching this program at home. If you want to get involved in supporting the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem UK, where this is your vehicle to bless Israel and the Jewish people at this critical time. And it's so important also we send our prayers to the families of those murdered Israeli diplomats. So thank you for watching this month's Jerusalem Dispatch ICEJ UK.
Catch the wind, he's carrying you.